All right, well, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Tim, am I good to go?
I think we're good to go.
All right, good. Well, good morning, and I want to thank everybody for joining us for this is our fourth annual 4R Technology Field Day, the first annual virtual event. And so like many activities this year, we've had to go virtual. And so we're glad that many of you could join us. The downside is we're not going to see each other. We're not going to be out in the field doing some things. But the upside is no travel. And especially on a day like today, that's a big benefit. We have tried to incorporate into the planning for today at least a taste of maybe being out in the field. And so you'll see some video work that we had captured earlier and some equipment work that's going on in some of the presentations. So as we get started, I wanted to mention that if you have a question for any of the panelists, there's a Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen in Zoom. And you can go there and type in a question. You won't be able to ask questions verbally, but you can type them in there and we'll try to get those answered as we can. Also want to remind those who are CCAs that we do have CEU credits available. You'll be able to get 2 credits for participating this morning. And during the wrap up at the end, we will put up the QR code for those of you who use your cell phones to check in and register for those credits. So hopefully that technology will work for you. If it does not work with the QR code, or if you just don't do it that way, I would ask you to simply send me an email with your name and your CCA number, and then we'll get it turned in so that you get those credits. Again, you can email me at warren@mawrc.org. With that, I think we're going to get right into our program. First of all, I just want to note that the reason we can offer these kind of programs without a registration fee is because we have great support from sponsors. And so I want to thank all of the organizations who have sponsored and helped us put this event together. And we've made it a part of the program each year there you see the logos for our sponsors. Each year, we also provide an opportunity for our sponsors to say a few words about their company and some of the things they're doing to support for our technologies. So at this time, I want to introduce Danny Leckie with Corteva Agriscience to give us a short presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Warren. Appreciate it. Given the opportunity here today to share some things that Corteva is doing. So, you know, we're really excited to be a part of this organization and also to help support 4Rs across the countryside. And one thing we wanted to do here today was just talk through some sustainability commitments that we have as a company. These are new commitments that we've launched, not only here in the US, but also globally. So you'll see a lot of folks within our company talking about, you know, being in it for farmers, in it for the land, in it for communities, and in it for our operations. And so we're making commitments and changes within our organization, not only nationally, but internationally, to help meet these objectives that we have. And really what's important to the folks here on the phone today is our commitments to farmers and the land. And so you'll see, you know, provide training to over 25 million farmers across not only the US, but then globally, enrich the lives of 500 million smallholder farmers, and then decrease greenhouse gas emissions while increasing yields, which, you know, that last point is really near and dear to our hearts here at Corteva with our nitrogen stabilizer business and the products that we continue to bring into the market to help decrease those greenhouse gas emissions and other effects from leaching and nitrates, et cetera. So the other one as well is in it for the land. So improve soil health on 30 million hectares. You'll see, you know, as we continue to develop in this market, bring new products forward, also enter the biological space, a deeper commitment and drive to enter into that market as well to help improve soil health. Advanced water stewardship, again, you know, really a key pillar of our stabilizer business today. And then enhance the biodiversity on 10+ million hectares across the world. So really big goals, but things that are they're happening right now within our company, and the commitments are real, and we're excited to share the output of that as we move forward. What I did want to touch on here today is just also our stabilizer business, right? And so Many folks on the line have probably heard of N-Serve and Instinct brands. These products have been proven for 40 years. We just launched Instinct Next Gen, our newest formulation of Instinct, into the market this past year. We have over 1,000 field trials and university research that show how we maximize yield and profit potential. You can see here just below, from 2009 to 2017, some average bushel an acre increases from both N-Serve and Instinct, 6+ bushel an acre advantage over the unstabilized acre. And just kind of a quick little note here, up to 70% of your nitrogen loss occurs below ground through leaching into the ground or denitrification into the atmosphere. So really talking about nitrates and greenhouse gas emissions and how we can really help benefit you in your operation as you are continuing to be good stewards of your land. And then, we can maximize any source of nitrogen as well. With our launch of Instinct Next Gen, we now have a reliable option in urea where we really didn't have before. So, you think about anhydrous ammonia and the use of N-Serve is really popular. And then you look at, UAN, urea, and liquid manure, and what we can really bring to the market with Instinct there. With our Instinct 2 brand leaving the market and Instinct Next Gen coming into the market. It's going to be really important that we continue to push stewardship and really the 4 R's. So, making sure we choose that right rate of fertilizer that's needed and helping maximize the use of that nitrogen efficiency. And then lastly, good for the crops and the environment. So just kind of in summary, right, our products work below the soil surface. They extend nitrogen availability, reduce nitrogen loss to leaching and denitrification, and work with any source of fertilizer now. So really some of the things we talk about with these products is you get 6 to 8 weeks more of nitrogen availability in the soil, less nitrogen leaching by 16% versus untreated, 51% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, and 28% greater soil retention. And really all that comes together when you think about improving water quality, when you think about improving your land, when you think about improving yield or efficiency of your fertilizer. All these things come together, and it's really centered around our stabilizer brands and what we can do for the environment and for your operation. So with that was just a quick update here from Corteva. We're excited to be a part of this today and listen in, and thank you for the time.
Thank you, Danny. We appreciate Corteva's sponsorship and your participation today. Next up, we're going to go to a presentation from Brian Ryberg. Many of you will know Brian or may remember that in 2019, in the summer of 2019, Brian and Sandy Ryberg were the hosts for our actual field day for 4R technology out near Buffalo Lake. And I just want to make a couple notes. 4Rs, we talk a lot about actual fertilizer applications, but there are a lot of things that go on within a farming system that can influence what is the right rate and what is the right placement and that sort of thing. And just a note that Brian has been really an innovator in using strip till and also in incorporating cover crops into his rotation. And I know NRCS, another one of our sponsors, in the USDA's 2017 Census of Agriculture, they note that in Minnesota, between 2012 and 2017, no-till and strip-till, ridge-till, those categories of acres increased by about a third in that 5-year period. Also, cover crops in that same 5-year period, cover crop acreage in Minnesota increased by more than 40%. So we know that a lot of farmers out there are innovating and attempting to incorporate these new practices into their operations. Brian has been doing it successfully for quite a while now. And so we wanted to have Brian talk about his experiences and how those good practices are affecting his bottom line. So with that, take it away, Brian.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me today. As Warren mentioned, we've been involved with the 4R program, just trying to do these practices on our own. Actually, we're chosen for the National 4R Advocate group last year, so we're very humbled and honored to be a part of that group. There's 6 chosen throughout the United States. So we're kind of unique in our area. That's my word for it. Some of my neighbors probably have a different name for it, but we've been playing around with cover crops for about 7 or 8 years. Primarily try to do something after sugar beets. We use corn, soybean, and sugar beets. We've had too many open winters and we see that dirt moving around that we didn't like. So we started with cereal rye. And as we transitioned to strip till in about 6 years ago, tried to kind of marry the two programs together. So I'm just going to whip you through some pictures here and we'll get into some economics. But on my cover page here, we run a Soil Warrior 24 22-inch machine. Apply just our P and K and micros in the fall and do a liquid program through 2 or 3 applications in the spring. And it's worked out very well for us. Tim, if you want to advance me one. So just some pictures up here on the left. You'll see that was an old cover crop. We were very fortunate, unfortunate and fortunate. We got caught in a severe hail event this year, wiped out some crops. This is a picture of our neighbor's field that they decided to retire and offered us some land. So it was an ideal situation. They had seeded oats. So early this fall, we went in there and stripped it. So we have some residue between the rows there and that'll die off over winter. Middle picture is a field that we seeded with cereal rye. We're set up with a vertical till rig with a seed box on it. So we apply cereal rye as we work corn stalks in the fall in a 1-pass system. Seed that cereal rye and then we plant soybeans directly into it and terminate the rye. And that's been a great weed control and water infiltration program for us. And to the right is sugar beets planted in strips on corn stalks. So go ahead, Tim. Just some more pictures again. On the left would be what our strips look like in corn stalks in the fall. We do use a vertical till ahead of that. High yields, narrow rows seem to create some residue issues. So that was one of the first things we had to learn is how to manage that residue a little better prior to the strip till system. And on the right is actually a picture of a sugar beet field that we had spread our cereal rye on. Had good growth in the fall, and this is actually a spring picture when we came back and did our strips in the spring that year. Go ahead, Tim. Some more pictures. So on the left would be corn planted into strips in a soybean field. You can actually see that soybean stubble row down between the corn rows. With 22-inch rows, we just move over 11 inches so we stay off that row and do our strips. And on the right would be the opposite. You can see the corn stalk still standing there between the soybeans, but by fall, that's all deteriorated, and with our soil health improving and biology of the soil, we're giving the earthworms a nice buffet to eat and decompose all that. So go ahead, Tim. Here would be a picture on the left of our strips in the spring, corn coming up, and to me, that's just a beautiful picture when you see that growing. It's just an ideal condition to plant into. We don't do any spring tillage. We plant right into those strips. So it's really simplified our operation. And then we started to play with interseeding cover crops in our corn as we side dress. So we take that same seed box off our vertical till and mount it on our side dress bar. And we played around with different mixes or different blends of the cover crops, 5-way mix, 8-way mix. But it's been a real challenge to get something to survive in that 22-inch rows and a tight canopy. We always have good emergence, and come July 4th, July 15th, you start to see this type of covers in the row, but we tend to lose it throughout that summer dormancy and shade period. So we're still playing around with that, but it's been a challenge, I can tell you. 30-inch rows seem to be a little better. You get a little more sunlight in there and keep that actively growing. Go ahead. So we'll get into some economics, and I I grabbed kind of a sample acreage here, so 3,000 acres. As you go through these numbers, you might differ on what you use for pricing or whatever, but it's just meant to be an example. So if you look at U of M studies or any type of thing, Iowa State, the average corn and soybean farm is typically known to use about 7 gallons of fuel per acre. I believe if we take out our sugar beet operation, we're more like a 4 gallon per acre. So we're saving about $3 gallons an acre. I picked $1.75 fuel price. You can see that adds up to about $15,000. The tractor hours, well, this isn't necessarily a cash expense each year, but at some point you're going to pay the piper when you trade that tractor. So I was showing if you split that 3,000 acres 50-50 into corn and soybeans, and kind of go through the math there, is show the typical hours you would use on that tractor in that conventional till system. Being our bar is a 44-foot strip till bar, that's what I use there. You can see save 155 tractor hours. The dealers generally use about $110 an hour for a trade number, so you'll save another $17,000. Go ahead, Tim. So if you take that same 155 tractor hours and you're paying somebody to drive it, I threw in 20 bucks an hour, there's another 3,000 bucks. Then we looked at fertilizer application. So prior to strip tilling, we were avid co-op supporter. You'd call the floater and have them spread the field. Current rates are $6.50 for a straight rate, $8.50 for a VRT. Our soil warrior, we're able to VRT 1 or 2 products at a time. And we do that on probably about 50% of our acres, depending on what the soil tests come back at. So there's another substantial savings there. Because we aren't relying on them for their application service, I'm able to get a little better price because I don't need their services. So I'm figuring a 5% discount, possibly a little bit more, adds up to more savings. So total yearly savings, I'm showing like $53,000 there, a little over 17 bucks an acre. So it certainly adds up, and I think I'm fairly conservative with the numbers we put together there. On the cover crop side, as I mentioned, we've had mixed results. We're doing interseeding. So our budget's always been about $15 an acre. The real challenge I have in my mind, I know what it does for soil health and the long-term benefits of it, but as you enter a $15 expense on a cash flow, there's no direct ROI for that. So you have to convince yourself and maybe your lender that you're doing this for the right reasons. We have been involved with the EQIP programs. This year I was a little frustrated, and I hope I don't offend anybody, but signed up some farms to help offset some costs of the cover crops, and came to find out they ran out of funding after we had done our seeding. And so we get no payment to help reimburse for some of that. We have used multiple different outlets or vendors for purchasing that cover crop seed. And the price seems to vary some. So if you're in that market, shop around. They're all, I mean, we've had great experiences with everybody, but as economics are tight, why there's price advantages in different places. So check those out. With that, I guess that's about all I have to say now. I'd certainly open up for questions later on, I guess.
Very, very good. Thank you, Brian. We appreciate that. And I appreciate learning more about your experience and seeing some of the numbers. The pictures are great, by the way, to visualize and especially this year when we can't go out and see fields, to be able to see what some of these practices look like on your farm. So we appreciate that. Brian will be with us. I know I can't scan the crowd to see who has a question, but I would encourage you to, again, jot them down in that Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll circle back to Brian as we can in between presentations and the like to get those questions answered. So at this time, we've got another video, a bit of a presentation from another one of our sponsors, New Leader Precision Application Equipment. They've been a sponsor with us the last couple of years. Last year did a field demo, and this year they're providing this video.
Responsible nutrient management is the foundation for the future of agriculture. That means that efficiency and control are more important than ever. Welcome to the NL5000 G5 from New Leader, taking spinner spreaders to an unprecedented level of precision in high output nutrient application. The new NL5000 sets itself apart by using patent-pending G5 spinner technology, proven to spread materials fast, wide, and more consistently. Now, operators have technology that gives them increased accuracy by shifting the fan frame forward and aft, as well as left and right to control the swath, altering where the product falls onto the spinners while in motion. Add conveyor speed adjustments and you've got pinpoint accuracy. G5 spinner control gives 16-section swath control, while adjusting conveyor speed to maintain accurate application rates. This gives operators the ability to significantly reduce overlap and apply nutrients to the right place. New G5 technology also provides half-width or remote spreading capabilities. This also gives last-pass control, allowing for a reduced swath width when finishing a field with a less than full pass. Dual RPM sensors and PWM valves maintain a precise speed on each spinner independently, so you control the distance you need. Flip a switch and the NL5000 G5 applies materials along a boundary line, placing nutrients right where crops need them. Inserting a multiplier increases productivity and reduces operating expenses by allowing you to spread up to 2 products simultaneously or independently at variable rates in one pass. An improved waterfall divider and matched rate output are standard and support even higher rates of output. Including micronutrients, the multi-bin can spread up to 4 products in one pass. Hydraulic feedgate controls allow the operator to adjust feedgate height from the cab. Using the feedgate optimizer, they can calculate and automatically set the feedgate. The NL5000 G5 is equipped with a user interface that's intuitive and easy to use. Features include diagnostic feedback and automated service notices. Cables and software make it plug and play for use with any compatible controller, so you only need to learn one system. For improved efficiency, the NL5000 saves specific product profiles and settings, allowing for quick recall when changing products. Behind the user screen, the NL5000 G5 comes complete with all spreader electronic controls, ensuring the fastest reactions and the best response. Cables are specifically made, professionally routed, and factory tested before delivery. The interface includes other features, like boundary spreading, a feedgate optimizer, low bin countdown, and automatic chain oiler. The system can also be expanded to control multiple bins and other functions. Precision application starts with precision manufacturing. Component relationships are accurately held by laser-cut parts and precisely positioned via actuators and sensors for the best possible application. New Leader products are sturdy and operate in the harshest environments. Key components are made of 304 stainless steel to resist corrosion and maintain their integrity. The front and rear grease banks on the NL5000 G5 make greasing the machine easy and efficient. The NL5000 G5 has advanced hydraulics that support precise independent spinner speed and conveyor control. An automatic chain tensioner gives extended conveyor life by keeping proper tension during machine operation. And to increase reliability, the NL5000G5 is equipped with sensors to monitor fluid levels, temperature, filter restrictions, and system pressure. Looking for the 4 R's in one solution? You've found it with the NL5000G5, the next generation of nutrient stewardship. New leader from Highway Equipment Company, building the best since 1939.
Well, I want to thank New Leader for that. Wow, yet another way that technology and engineering is helping us with advancing the 4 R's. So we do have one question that came in, and I guess since we've got a little bit of time right now in between presentations, Brian, if you'd unmute, I'd ask you to answer that question that came in, and if you'd read the question so that everyone can hear it.
Sure. Question here was maintenance issues on a soil warrior, and what is today's cost of a soil warrior? Maintenance has been really good. They've just done a tremendous job of building this unit. It's built like a tank. All bearings are oil-filled bearings and whatnot. So considering the acres we put it over, it's been really good. Today's cost of a soil warrior, I'm going to kind of guess here. When we purchased ours about 6 years ago, with all the bells and whistles we put on it, was about $300,000. Substantial amount of money in our case was offset by a lot of duplication and of equipment and whatnot that we were able to sell. So it was a little easier to absorb that cost, but definitely a high price rig. But considering what it's doing for us and fertilizer application, why probably not too outstanding compared to a field cultivator and a ripper and all those other things that you can get rid of. So.
All right. Well, thank you, Brian. Appreciate that. And continue to put your questions in that Q&A box if you would. At this time, we're going to transition to our next presentation. Jared Nordick farms up in Wilkin County. Jared has been very active in the water quality world. Not only is he an SWCD supervisor in his county, he's also been part of our Discovery Farm program. And so the rest of the morning, we're going to be talking about Jared's farm and things he does for nutrient management, and then also some ongoing research that's happening up there prior with Discovery Farms, and then currently the Department of Agriculture continues to do some water quality work at Nordick's farm. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jared.
Thank you, Warren. There we go. Tim's got a video. Corn and soybeans is our #1 commodities right now. Looking to get back into some wheat. Be nice to #1 get a price for it, and #2 just be able to get some quality out of it when you sell it. You know, when you market something at $5 and you get $3.75 out of net at the elevator, that don't work. So kind of chosen the non-wheat route for right now, but I think as we look forward into the future, you know, weed resistant management, there's going to have to be some other things that wheat does show a benefit of having on the farm. Sometimes it's not financially upfront, but maybe it's a year later in the soybeans we'll maybe have some better weed control and things like that. So kind of looking at some other avenues. Being here in the Red River Valley, I'm kind of in the old Lake Agassiz. Lake bottom is what we are here. Is the start of the Red River of the North is in Breckenridge, which is about 12 miles southwest of me. So a lot of my water still ends up going straight west towards the Kent, Minnesota area. South of Fargo Moorhead, 35 miles is about where it's at. But when I look east, we have the beach of the old Lake Agassiz, and a big lake over there is like Otter Tail Lake, and that's like 300 feet above where I am. So we've got a lot of aquifer pressure is kind of what we feel it is. And by adding drain tile to our farm, we feel that we're removing that excess moisture, but then giving just a better, healthier crop that in return is, affects my pocketbook. Soluble salts are a big issue. Headlands used to be white. Zero crop. We put money into them, like we were trying to farm an acre of normal good ground, and now we've actually changed, and we haven't even put some fertilizer on them headlands anymore because it wasn't, worth it. Now, adding drain tile to it's been a big benefit. So, like I say, the drain tile for us here in the valley, with the water table, we can drive around today, middle into August here, there's water sitting in our fields, and where I have drain tile, that I have a sponge effect, is the way I guess I would put it, is we've drained that out. So when we get these heavier rains, we actually have some holding capacity, and that's what cuts down on our runoff, which that's where a lot of our sediment comes from that ends up in the river, is that surface runoff. We sit down here, like I say, it's kind of the Red River Basin type of things, but in the Red River Valley, as water quantity across the whole state is, states, I guess United States has just been big. And, we as farmers kind of want to say that, well, tile drainage is kind of the do-all for flood control. I don't know that I can scientifically say that personally, but I have seen where there's tile in some fields that I haven't seen the water runoff off them fields like we have before. It's a delayed release, and the way I've explained it to many people is look at the wife, the mom, the grandma, or whoever that puts the sponge on the back of the kitchen sink, and over 3 days that sponge collapses down and it gets dry. And when you start adding water to it, what happens? That sponge starts swelling back up slowly, and it absorbs all that water. That's kind of the way I look at it as my farm, is the soil profile. Soil is a great holding capacity for many minerals, nutrients, you name it, water. But if it's already full, you can't put any more in it. So if we can get that sponge effect and get that dried out, and then be able to come in, and when we get an inch rain, very seldom do I see much water run off of any of our fields. And I'll have neighbors that there's a 24-inch culvert off the same quarter of land running plumb full. The ditch is full of silt and runoff or whatever, and coming out of my tile, and it's nice crystal clear water. And so like I say, I think the tile in the industry across the whole country has been very beneficial. It's not a do-all for everybody, but been very beneficial, I think, across the whole United States. We have a lot of surface drainage here. I'm very fortunate here in like our home section. It's as flat as a tabletop. Everybody's like, I don't know how you can farm something so flat. The problem is there's 11 feet of fall, which a lot of people don't understand that until you put a laser up. I can have water running over on a township road on the west end and the east end. There's no water. So surface drainage has been very important for us over the years, but we've always had these little ridges in the field that don't really need a ditch, but yet they kind of do. And by adding that drain tile to it, I do very seldom ditching anymore, just for that surface runoff. So the other benefits that we've seen from the drain tile is it puts us in the field probably 5 to 7 days sooner. Soil warms up better. The plant health is just so much greater, I guess. And I think as we've moved forward, and we've learned this too, is nutrient uptake is going to be better. I can't build really out here in my soil, it doesn't seem like. So being able to put on that right rate and being able to use that up in season, and just healthier plants, and at the end of the day is what makes my pocketbook look better, I guess. Yeah, so our fall pass is usually a disc ripper. It depends upon where our soil compaction is. We use a piezometer here on our farm. As we go down, it's a PSI gauge. It's got a point on the end, and it tells us where our resistance is at. And we're pretty religious about that. I'm the one that kind of manages that side. So before we work a field, we go out there, we find out where the hard pan is, and if it needs a ripper, we're more than willing to buy the diesel fuel and put it in there to get that ripped open, because we've learned a lot about corn. Greg Sauter in the old precision planting days, been a dealer for them for quite a while, and learned a lot about corn roots. And me personally, we were ripping a lot of soybean ground for corn to get that root structure in the cornfields. So we've used a disc ripper quite a bit on our farm. Now we've kind of went back to some chisel plowing again, because being able to have that tile in there, we're not also seeing them compaction issues with that wet, extra mucky soil. So changing tillage passes in the spring, we'll just use a field cultivator, one pass. If it's not quite right, we do use a soil finisher with a crumbler, coulter machine, and just make it like a garden bed, because I want my planter to ride really smooth. the rumors in the 80s were no till, no farm. We are seeing that change. When you have a father that has farmed for 43 years in the same ground as what you're farming, it's pretty tough to persuade that gentleman to, hey, we need to look at the avenues. Got a lot of neighbors in Wilkin County. The SWCD is really on board with some cover crops and trying to implement that back onto some farms, and we're starting to see some change. Not right locally here, just because if it's not been tiled, boy, in the spring, it's really tough to do. If you leave soybean ground unworked here, it's really tough to get into it in the spring. It just seems like it don't dry out. We've tried just an anhydrous applicator before, 24-inch spacing, just to get a little black on top, but leave some residue. That soil just stays that cold. So, maybe it's tile first, and then we can start looking at them things. And I think that's probably where we're at, Tim, is my discovery farm has kind of been my research farm, I guess, so where we keep trying some things. And I'm really leaning towards, when I have corn up there the next time, is to probably plant some rye in it in the fall and not work that ground at all, and then be able to come in and no-till soybeans right into that in the spring, because I've released that risk of cold soil, with the water management, is being able to lower that water table. You don't have that, iceberg to try to warm up in the spring. So a few years ago, Minnesota Department of Agriculture had a study that they want to do on nitrogen management. So I applied for a permit, or not a permit, but a grant to do that. And we ran out of wheat seed. So I had 90 units of applied nitrogen on that. Where normally in our optimum cornfields are about 150 units of applied nitrogen. And so we played with them rates a little bit, and I had come back in season really early. Corn was about pop can high. Put on 10 gallons of 28% early, coultered it in. Then I come back a couple weeks later at about knee high and put on a 10-gallon rate again. Plus I juiced it up and went up all the way up to a 20-gallon, which really exceeded what I needed. And then I went over to where we had on 150 units of applied already, and I done a 10-gallon rate increase plus another 20. So really juiced it up. And normally corn yields in Wilkin County are 175 to 200 is kind of where we've been. So going back, my 90 units of applied nitrogen gave me 200 bushel corn, and that's a 0.5. And a lot of guys used to talk about 1.1, 1.2, 1.3 even, So that's where we've been cutting our nitrogen rates back a little bit, is being able to find that sweet spot. But the other part, guys, I think we need to look at is organic matters. Some guys say we can credit that. If you got a 4 organic matter, I take it times 10, so I was figuring I had 40 units of nitrogen laying out there. So we've kind of been using that credit also, and agronomists will argue with you, but I've been doing it, and I'm still in business, so I think I'm doing the right thing, and dollars and cents. We have a waterway that comes through here. It's small most of the time, but there's a couple times she gets pretty wild, and we've had some stream bank erosion on that. Being in the Minnesota Ag Water Quality Program also has gave us an opportunity to kind of kick us, a little bit in the tail feathers and get some special funding, I guess, available for us. And so we've been doing some stream bank restoration projects, hauling in some rock, putting some mat down, planting a deep-rooted grass also in them locations, and really seeing some big benefits of that. And also had multiple NRCS people through our farm and come out, and my opinion is it's nice to get them out here. Is they're sending the money out to the landscape, but they don't always follow through sometimes and actually see if they're getting a bang for their buck. And I guess I'm more than willing that if I'm doing a good job and they're doing a good job, I think they need to be aware of it, because it makes it easier for them moving in the future. Is, hey, where do we put the dollar? And I guess that's been a big benefit for our farm also, is being able to do that. We had a creek that had a big oxbow in it. It was 3 feet higher than the main channel. We had tried for 20 years plus to try to close that up and mitigate a wetland, and we just had somebody in the office that just thought we were crazy, and it just would never happen. And finally we explained, we're double applying in these little bends and stuff like that, and we ended up, we moved a wetland and made kind of a holding pond that when the water's high, we actually run water into it and the water can't go back out. So by doing that, now we have a nice straight line to farm by. We're not over applying any of the inputs, if it's chemicals, herbicides, pesticides, insecticides, whatever, seed, it just makes things a lot cleaner. So that's been also a great benefit for our farm. So NRCS and Minnesota Department of Ag, when we first started this program about 5 years ago, there was a guy from NRCS that kind of had started this all of a sudden behind the scenes. His name was Don Balloon, and we were down at the Minnesota Convention of Shoreline Water Conservation Districts. He come up to me and he said, "Hey Jared," he says, I got a program I want you to lead." And I went, "Holy moly, now what?" And so he'd already told me he had some funding lined up, and I was like, "Well, yeah, but what are we going to do?" And then come to find out, he's retiring on us. So what a great guy. Plant the seed and then run away. So a little fun with it. But so what it done is it allowed us to put some more tile in on our farm and look at some other management practices that haven't really been implemented by many farmers kind of in the valley here. Is drain water management. Can we build up that water table instead of removing, most of the time the tiles put in anywhere from 48 inches up to about 32 inches on average. That's the depth of the tile to make the grade. And can we hold back, say, 18 inches of water into that profile instead of releasing all of it? And so we've been doing that. There's no scientific way of learning how to do it. We just kind of shot from the hip by rights, but that's been working very good. We put the boards in after the crop is planted, and I get what I need done, and then we put them in. So during the growing season, we're holding some water back, and usually here in Wilkin County, we always have a dry spell late July, August, where soybeans, I think we lose 10 to 15% of our yield because we start losing some pods, we get dry. So by adding in these boards, kind of building up the dam to create that water table to rise higher, we've seen some benefits on that. We have, it's only a couple years of cropping season that we've had into it, but we are seeing that them fields in general have been yielding a little bit more than the rest of them. So like I say, on corn, haven't really seen a big benefit from holding the water back yet, but the biggest thing is by adding in that drain tile for corn for us, it's just been huge. I've had the benefit of another tiled piece that we've added on our farm, and there used to be the highs and lows were 150 bushel spread from bottom to top, and that parameter right now is about a 50 bushel spread, but going back to the Discovery Farm, it's about a 10 bushel from headland to headland. That's how tight that parameter is, and that's where the money's to be made, is to bring them parameters up on the poor ground. We got an email from Wilkin County SWCD from Don Bayumpa saying that there was a site that they wanted to come up to here in Wilkin County and do some water research on, and showed it to my dad right away, and he's like, "Yeah, bunch of bureaucrats wanting to come out of the cities, and take all of our information." And my approach is, just because we're farmers, are we always doing the right thing? And we don't want nobody to know what we are doing, because that has been the stigma across the countryside, is farmers are always doing something bad. And I guess my opinion was, well, let's look into it and see what we can get out of it. And been a great learning curve. They come up, put a bunch of monitoring equipment on my tile pump right after a new install. So kind of fresh first year, seeing some, just great data, been really good data. Us as kind of being conservationists has paid some dividends also, I think, because we've been trying to use the right rate, type deal. So we've seen some great numbers out of that. And I think if we would have been over applying, we would have probably seen some influctuations of that also. So so it was like jump on board and let's do it. And yeah, it's been a great team. Discovery Farm's doing great. So yeah, good learning curve. Number one was, water quantity, I guess, was probably my number one thing, and then water quality was second, or flip-flop them. To me, they probably could have been a tie, but, as the Red River runs north, flood retention and flood reduction and water reduction's, major key for us down here in the southern part of the valley. So to be able to share our numbers with the neighbors to the north has been really good. Amount of water that we are removing, everybody sees the water coming out of the pumps and just, oh my gosh, there's so much water. Well, when you look at surface runoff versus what I'm removing, over a 7-day period out of my tile pump is just, it's just a reduction. So, being able to share them stories, I guess, with, fellow neighbors and well, now we've had tours through here, so it's nationally now. So when we started the Discovery Farm was the fall of 2013, freshly pattern tiled field that did run for until 2018. Got a little short on funding and a few things, but we had also not really seen much change. It was just such a great site, I guess. I was actually kind of hoping we actually would have found a little bit more faults, I guess, on it, so we could have learned some more. But I guess if you're already doing a good job and being a steward of the land, I guess it kind of goes to show that you know, checks and balances are still working. So as we moved in with MDA in you know, 2016, this was kind of a nice way to marry it and cross-check the checks and balances, I guess, just because we had a quarter a mile away, that if we seen some, you know, weird data coming out of there, we could always fall back and rely on that. So as that moved forward, that was a nice tie, I guess, and I always feel that it's always nice if you've got good, hard data. You know what, that's rock solid. So if you can compare against it, I guess I don't know why you'd want to look anywhere else and try to bring in some other data that could be skewed. So right from the area, base core was really important to us. In 2016 with MDA, what it was is wanted, you know, looking at one parcel, kind of is where we started at, is you know, doing some pattern tiling, and then also we have what we call like a sub watershed, I guess, in that quarter. We actually have 4 control structures, so that shows control drainage, and then there's a middle 50 acres that has pattern tile in it, and then the north 50 acres actually has no tile in it. So we're taking 50 acres of no tile, 50 acres of a pattern tile, and then 50 acres of controlled drainage with kind of 4 subs into that. So being able to, you know, monitor water quantities and different parameters in that has been very important to us also. So the last couple of years, we haven't seen a huge yield reduction by no tile. It's probably been more weather in the fall when we're wet. It's been a nightmare to combine soybeans in. We've had roots up there 16 inches deep, just no good. So like I say, that's been our biggest benefit on that. And then on the other farm, we have 65 acres that we had tiled, and we have about 10 acres that go into like a saturated buffer. Pretty new into this area, which has been really exciting for me, is I guess the way I kind of explain it is kind of like a septic system. It's like a drain field, but we run the tile to a control structure, and then we had kind of some wasteland in the oxbow of a creek, and we actually drain that water into 2 different lines into that. And then we have some, we call them little observation wells, some 2-inch PVC pipe that goes down in the soil about 8 feet. And we're actually to be able to monitor where that water level is. And before that water reaches the creek about 50 feet away, we've cut the nitrate loss just about to a 0 in that, that short distance, really. So about 5-10 feet from the tile, I think we're roughly, you know, 10 units of nitrogen is what it was, and being able to clean that up before it hits the waterway has been beneficial. Now, one thing is, you know, some people said, well, gosh, you know, maybe that should be in every tile project. It's not going to fit in every tile project. It's kind of site specific, but if we can start getting some producers to look at that and say, you know what, I got a little wasteland over here. Hey, I'm willing to give up this field edge and maybe do that. That's going to be very beneficial, or put it in some hayland because it's been kind of some wasteland over years. That, to me, is where we can use it, because we can pull that back up and put it in a commodity. You know, when we first started, we were trying to look at, you know, nitrogen management, number one. It's a really sandy loam quarter that is on. I was told for years from Grandpa, my dad, you know, the nitrogen leaches in this country. It just goes right on down. And coming to find out, we were using about, you know, 10 units of nitrogen through that tile system, which is very minimal. So I think what was happening is as we've been wetter over the years without tile, is it was actually volatilization going up. So getting rid of standing water with that drain tile in there to cut that, number one, that was a big plus. Then it also gave us the opportunity to look into some split nitrate applications, you know, with nitrogen. We tried building my own strip bander, I guess it was, to put some 28% down in season really early, then come back with some later, trying experiments. Never seen a benefit out of it anywhere. So actually what it's done is it's allowed me to drop my nitrogen applications down. It's because I think we have healthier soil now. Organic matters are going up. Yeah, just seen some good benefits from it. So really changing my farm practices. Actually, I've just probably been cutting rates probably more than anything. Do we manage our tile ground different than our non-tiled ground? What we've found is kind of our tiled ground, we've actually cut our nitrogen use back just a little bit. I think we have healthier soil there. I'm starting to see that the soil is changing. So being able to get rid of that extra water, like I say in an earlier comment, is, you know, being able to get rid of that volatilization. So that's probably our biggest thing right there. Phosphorus, haven't really seen any change there. We're kind of just stuck in a rut, just kind of the same old right there. But using tissue tests, you know, vice versa, looking at them back and forth, both plants are very healthy. So that's probably the biggest thing there, is just kind of sit idle right there at the moment. But yeah, trying to learn from what we can with the data that we're given provided. Yeah, the first tile we put back in probably in about 93, probably. My dad put some in, just some little single runs east of our yard. We kind of done it, and the neighbors stopped by and, what the heck are you doing? When it gets dry, you're gonna really regret this. You know, well, it was new in the area. I wish we would have tiled 100% of it back then, because the cost was just very cheap. But we didn't know neither. So that was kind of our own little research, and moving forward is where we started at. Currently, we own most of our land, fortunately enough, so we're not out renting a lot. But on our own land, I would say we're about 65% tiled. Got the worst of it done already. I would hope in 3 to 5 years to probably get go up to 80%, and a couple years after that, try to get to 100%, I guess, is where I'd really like to get to. It just takes so much risk out of the equation, and us as farmers dealing with poor Mother Nature. I mean, she gives us a crystal ball, and let me tell you, you can look into it one day and she's giving you one forecast, and the next she changes it, and let me tell you, the rodeo is over in a quick hurry. So, you know, being able to, it can rain a couple tenths, and a day later we can go do field work, and it's just because of that sponge effect. And it's not that the tile's running, it's just that water could percolate down, and it just eliminated that risk for me. So, really, it's been great benefit for our farm. I jumped on board on it right away, and you know, us as farmers get chastised all the time for doing things wrong. And I guess the way my dad explains it is you walk into a car dealership and you see the guy that's working in your car, he's got a little badge on it that says ASE certified. You know, it says he knows what he's doing, I guess. And you know, that was kind of something for us, is to be able to share with farmers that, you know, by having our farm certified, not that we know what we're doing, it's just that we've shared our information with the people and been able to look at it and share our farm story, I guess, which nobody else knows that information, and then they take that information and they look at it and they say, you know what, you know, they're using best management practices on the farm. So to be able to do that, and then that gives you that other route, you know, to get some funding available through NRCS and local SWCD, it builds that network between the farmer and I guess the government. And there's always been some disconnect there, as farmers don't want the government knowing what they're doing neither. And I'm not saying that I'm a fan of it neither by rights, but when you need help, and the last project we done on our farm here with the stream bank restoration project, it would have never got done without some funding through NRCS, or, you know, being able to be enrolled in the egg water quality program neither. So, you know, that was one thing. It's just another avenue for us as farmers to try to give back, I guess, to the taxpayers and of the state of Minnesota, that, hey, you know what, we use your money the right way. And to me, that's very beneficial. If they know where the dollars are going and we're doing it right, it's that team effort and the networking that we need as producers on the landscape. You know, it's very important to us. I guess us as farmers, I think we learn every day of the week. You know, there's practices that work in Iowa that my dad has said they'll never work here in west central Minnesota. Well, if they work in Iowa, why can't they work here? Yeah, our growing seasons are different, you know. So we've looked at different avenues and stuff like that. Our biggest thing is up here is we stay cold so much longer. I don't think we get the bacteria breakdowns like they do down there. The bugs freeze to death here in the middle of winter. So, you know, that's our biggest thing, is just trying to do what's right for the landscape, I guess is the way I'd put it.
All right. Well, so appreciate that Jared allowed us to make that video so that you could get Obviously, you can tell Jared was responding to a series of questions, but then also it allowed us to do some video work out in the field. And so you can see the landscape that Jared's working in. So at this time, I would just ask Jared to maybe build on some of the comments. If you've got other thoughts you want to add. And then I'd also note that you've got one question in the box asking, what is your typical tile spacing and depth? I know you mentioned depth in the video, but maybe you could talk a little bit more detail about how you install tile in your area.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thanks again for all the sponsors. I guess if it's not all of us sitting at these panelists or the sponsors to continue education like this, I guess that's very critical. And I want to make sure that gets brought home to everybody. So again, thank you guys, and let's continue efforts like this. If it's virtual through a Zoom meeting, or we get back in the field again. I guess my farm has always been open. I've had senators from across the United States on this farm. We've had people from Canada here. And I want to continue that because I think it goes back to they are the ones writing the laws. And I guess if they're writing the laws, I think they should know what us farmers are trying to do to try to be good stewards to the land and make sure that we are doing it right also. And that's been the learning curve, like I've said, that, just because what I'm doing here, might not work in Iowa, or what Brian's doing down in southern Minnesota, maybe it won't work up here. But then again, why can't it work up here? And I think that's where I, kind of go back to is, trying to move forward with cover crops is something that we're going to start looking into more and more all the time. Wilkin County has got a lot of acres enrolled in cover crops this year now. Since we've done this video, it's just exploded. A lot of PP acres. That got a good cover crop on it, so that probably helped. Thanks again to Mother Nature for giving everybody a bad deck of cards by rights. But I guess us that got the crop in, we are benefiting from it because it's a short crop and the commodity prices are turning around now. So yeah, what a good time we are. So the question was, what was the depth of tile? Is that correct, Warren?
Excuse me. Yes, depth and spacing.
Okay, so depth is anywhere from 36 at the shallowest we want to be, and the deepest we really want to probably go to is 48 inches. I guess the way I kind of put it in is the deeper the tile, the farther you can pull it from. But when you get into a clay soil, you can't pull that tile, you can't pull that water into the tile neither. So then you got to start going closer with spacing. So we have some stuff in some sandy loam at 80 feet. Too far apart. It probably should be 60 feet. The last stuff we've done with MDA was at 50-foot spacing, and that seems to be like that's humming really good, the 50-foot spacing.
Perfect. So we don't have any other open questions, well, we do. Question for your drainage water management. Do you have pumps to manage or just the boards, weirs to adjust? And how do you decide when to install, remove, adjust those boards?
Yes. Good morning, John. Thanks for joining us. Yes, we have pumps on one of the sections, and the other one is actual just natural drainage. So what we have is it's kind of a big square box, and we have boards in there that are anywhere from 2 inches up to I think about 16-inch boards that we can raise that water level in. So what we'll do on them is we've kind of shot from the hip is what it's been, is we don't know how much water we should hold back. So we're kind of holding back about 18 inches of water. So on a 36-inch depth, we're bringing that water level back up to about 18. And I have not had problems with that, but it's still lowered that water table enough to make it work great on. So the other one on the old Discovery Farm, when we put that in, there's a pump on the southwest corner. The fall on that field is probably 6 feet from the northeast to the southeast there, or southwest, excuse me. And yeah, I can shut my pump off. The problem is with the landscape with so much fall, I can almost flood out the bottom 30 acres. I'll have water standing on top just because all the fall is to that corner. I wish we could have designed it different at that time and put different control structures in the west end and then be able to hold that water through the bigger landscape there. So, it's a design process, and that's where working with the local contractors, we've really learned a lot. And there's going to be more and more buzz about it in the countryside. The guys willing to put the boxes on the field edges and holding back some water. So I don't know the calculations off the top of my head of how much we have held back for sure in water removal, but I'm sure we have that information. We could get it if you're looking for it, John.
All right, thanks, Jared. Another question. This one comes to us from Lee Fixon with TNC. First, and you may be seeing this in the chat box as well, but first he wants to thank you for everything you're doing, but then he also has a question for you. Based on your experience, what do you think are the best practices we should be focusing on and investing in at a larger scale to ultimately reduce flooding up in the Red River Valley?
Oh boy, that's a loaded statement. You know, like I've said before, my dad's been on this property for 40 plus years. And what bugs me is we've got individual government agencies buying land up and non-government agencies also that, to me, have been poor stewards of the landscape. We out here are trying to do what's right. Yes, number one for Jared Nordick or Gerald Nordick on our family farm, but them people could surely help us out by a little bit of even just building some, 4-foot, dikes on some, southwest of that property to try to help throttle that water off. I mean, it's a known fact that grassland does not remove much water at all. And that's, to me, where we should be holding it and releasing it over time. And, we have dams in the area now that they're talking about taking back out of the river structures and stuff like that. And, dams were originally put in for flood control, and it wasn't long it become recreational control. And I guess moving forward is, I think, and that's kind of why I keep bringing this up, is that we keep, I keep bringing agency people in, and I bring them, northeast of my place 5 miles. And we did have one system up there. They don't want to admit that it's for flood control, but man, they have saved, 4 miles downstream. We have no township road issues anymore. We used to have blowouts all over in there. So I just think it's just got to get a network together and get them folks on the landscape and listen to us. We live here daily. We know what's going on.
Very good, thank you. And let me look here. I think we have another question. Oh, could you talk a bit more about nitrogen and salts and any other changes in nutrient management that you might be trying due to the controlled drainage?
When it comes to the nitrogen management, I mean, I have not found anything that works. I mean, we've worked with central crop consultants here in the valley. We're starting to play with some slow release nitrogen. I don't know. The problem has been lately here is the weather has just been so sporadic. 1 year we're kind of wet, the next we finally dry out. We just come out of a bad wet cycle here. And nitrogen management, I mean, I'd love to try to split applying nitrogen. I talked about that previously where we've done that. I've done some on my own, just go put it 10 gallons out, spend the 4th of July putting it on knee-high corn, and come out in October 10th, we combine it, and I lost 10 bushel to the acre where I put extra nitrogen on. And why? I mean, I don't have an agronomist that can tell me why. I talked to local co-ops, why would, putting 10 more units of nitrogen on go backwards? I believe that some of it is we have high pH soil. We run about an 8.2 pH. Some of the soluble salts are, 2s to spots up to even 6. I mean, they're as white as grandma's tablecloth. And so I'm wondering, is that extra nitrogen, is it almost just becoming like a bad apple in the soil also by adding more? Is it just cannibalizing that corn stock and just making it that much worse, I guess? So we're kind of throttled back right now to kind of going back to old school. And, the old NPK dry, we used to use a lot of liquid P and K, kind of went away from that, started seeing some things taper off a little bit. So this year we went back to a starter in furrow, dry P and K also, and seeing some great plant health again and learn some things. So I think we kind of, about time we max out one place, sometimes we got to reset and then start over again. So I guess that's kind of where we're going to again now.
All right, thanks for that, Jared. Let me check here. Question from Catherine Kelly. Have you had any technical assistance in addition to the SWCDs in terms of developing a comprehensive water management plan for the future to incorporate additional practices? Recognizing you've already done a lot of things, but have you had any discussion with SWCD about comprehensively planning to do even more?
Yeah, we used to, we were kind of in another program that kind of got short on some funding, and so that kind of dried up. And it's kind of one of them deals. What happens is when you're kind of maxed out kind of to where you think you're at, funding is kind of hard to get. And like Brian said earlier in one of his programs is EQIP. A lot of guys went and applied for EQIP and kind of went and done some things hoping that it was going to come. And you kind of spend the money and it don't come, and kind of leaves a bad taste in your mouth a little bit when it comes back to agencies like that. So currently we've got nothing on the books. We did do a drain water management plan on that discovery farm that we talked about earlier on when I could turn that pump on, and it was when the river at Abercrombie, North Dakota, straight west of me and a little bit north, when that river would crest at a flood stage and start receding, and then I could turn my pump on. Well, it was a deal by the time that happened. I mean, it didn't matter. The ground was still froze. There was no water running here anyways. So right now we've kind of stalled out, but as we move into cover crops, I think we're going to be relying, back onto them somewhat just for, I don't know that to me it's a financial assistance. It's probably trying to get the right mix on the right acre, I guess, to make sure that, I don't want to put a cover crop out there and then go, hey, we were going to put this into soybeans and then find out that my herbicide program won't kill whatever I planted. So I guess that's probably where I'm going to really, rely on our office is, helping get the right product on the right acre.
Very good. I don't see any other questions right now. Certainly, if you, for those on the call or the Zoom meeting, if you have questions, feel free to chat them in or type them into the Q&A box. Drainage has been a big part of the topic that Jared has talked about this morning. And when we were looking for a discovery farm up in the Red River Valley, one of the things going on in the background was that we were seeing more interest in drainage because of recent some wetter years. And we were also beginning to hear more criticism of drainage. And so, in Jared's experience, he's described it very well. I think the benefits that they've seen with doing some drainage on their land. And so when we were looking for a discovery farm, we wanted to find a farm that had recent drainage activity so that we could perhaps begin to put some numbers to it. And so at this time, I would first I want to thank Tim Raditz. Tim Raditz is the Discovery Farms coordinator for Minnesota. I want to thank him for his technical role this morning. He's the one making sure all the presentations come up right and fit together. So thank you for that, Tim. But then also, he's going to be our next presenter talking about the data that we collected through the Discovery Farms program at the Nordick farm. So Tim, take it away.
Thanks, Warren. Yeah, thanks everybody for joining. I think there's been some great questions, and we were hoping for some great questions during this event. And I keep crossing my fingers that the technology is going to work as we finish up this event. But what I'm going to do is play a short video that describes our project, our Discovery Farms project out at Nordick's. And then I have some data slides to back up some of the things I talked about in the video. So it'll be a short presentation after that, looking at different water quality variables and different lessons that we learned out at Nordick's. So enjoy. Well, I'm Tim Raditz. I'm the coordinator of the Minnesota Discovery Farms program. The Discovery Farms program is a farmer-led water quality research and educational program. We focus on collecting water quality information on real working farms throughout Minnesota, 365 days a year. So our program has three main points that we're trying to follow. One is farmer leadership. We really want farmers to get involved in water quality discussions and provide a platform for their voices to be heard, because we feel that they have a lot of on-the-ground knowledge of a lot of these water quality discussions that are going on, and they need to be well represented in that discussion. We also have our program is led by a steering committee who selects our research opportunities, farms, places that we go collect data on, and this is a primarily farmer-led steering committee. So we get Organized by farmers, led by farmers. Also a main part of our funding source for our Discovery Farms program comes from the corn and soybean checkoff organizations in the state of Minnesota. So not only are they leading with their voices, we're also leading with their pocketbooks. So that is very important for our program. The second part that we try to follow with on our program is credible research. So when we show up to a farm, we don't, change anything that's going on in the field. We just monitor what's currently going on. Let the farmers do what they do best, farm the fields, and we set up a monitoring system that's going to collect high quality, unbiased information that we can use in our education and outreach program. We do this through our partners. This would be with the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. They're essential in setting up our monitoring equipment and testing to make sure that we get good results. We also partner with local soil and water conservation districts or watershed districts. They're the actual ones that come out and take the samples, ship them off to the lab, and maintain our sites. So our partnerships are very key in making our Discovery Farm sites work. Lastly, we focus on communications and outreach. So we don't want to collect this data and just have it sit on a shelf somewhere or in my brain and nobody really knows what's going on. We want to get out and talk about what we're learning so that other researchers, other water quality professionals can learn about what we're finding, but also other farmers as well, as Jared is able to get up and talk about what he does and why he's interested in a program like this. We work with 20 plus, or have worked with 20 plus farms throughout Minnesota. And so that network of growing farmer leaders that are interested in putting their hand up and saying, come take a look at me, see what I'm doing, let's do some real monitoring and see what some of my water quality metrics are, that is growing, and we're gaining a lot more information as we go. So at this Nordick Discovery Farm site, we're monitoring a quarter section, which is 160 acres, corn soybean rotation, and it's pattern tiled. So it was pattern tiled just recently before we started monitoring. Our pattern tile all drains to a drainage sump pump like this and gets pumped out. So it's a pump out tile system. And pretty much what our automated equipment does is anytime the pump kicks on, we monitor how much flow is happening, and then for every so many amount of gallons that's flowing through that pump out system, we sample that for water quality metrics, primarily being sediment, nitrogen, and phosphorus. Those are the three main nutrients and things we're looking at. So we were at the Nordick farm from 2013 to 2018, so we did 6 full years of monitoring. And this farm was incredibly consistent in their water quality metrics and the amount of water that kicked out of this tile system. It averaged at about 3 inches per year of amount of tile drainage coming off of that quarter section. So if you can picture 3 inches of water over 160 acres, that's what we monitored on average in a given year, which is lower than some other parts of the state. And we found that this is primarily based on precipitation. The more precipitation you get, the more tile drainage you tend to get. And we tend to see that in southern Minnesota. But up here in northwest Minnesota, where annual precipitation amounts are in general much lower, about 10 inches lower than southern Minnesota, we just don't see the amount of tile drainage compared to southern Minnesota. Also, time frames for runoff or tile drainage here in Wilkin County. There was 64% of the monthly or the total tile drainage happened in the months of April to June. So for most of the year, the system's not moving much water, but during that April through June time period is when we move the most of our water. And in terms of what's in that water, when we sample for sediments and phosphorus, the numbers coming out of our tile system are in general very low across Minnesota for those two constituents. But in particular for northwest Minnesota, we see really low phosphorus numbers and also really low soil movement numbers within that tile system. The water that we're monitoring is filtered through a soil profile, so it doesn't allow much sediment to move through with it and move out of the system. And also these soils in this area hold on to phosphorus very tightly. So while there may be a lot of phosphorus in the ground, it is bound very tightly to the soil particles, and it isn't allowed to move down and through the tile system and out of the field. The one difference would be on the nitrogen side. When we're looking at nitrogen movement, we're primarily looking at tile drainage. And this is because as nitrogen in the fields turns into nitrate, nitrate moves freely with water and can move with the water down to the tile and out of the system. So when we're looking at tile systems, that's our one area of concern. We really need to be doing a good job with our nitrogen management to really prohibit excess nitrogen losses through that tile system. And it's something Jared has done very well throughout the 6 years that we've monitored here. His nitrogen concentrations very consistent from year to year. Didn't see very many bumps up throughout the year. So we could tell from the data that we collected that they were doing about as good a job as you could on nitrogen management through the tile data that we collected. So we started this project in 2013 and monitored for 6 years till 2018. The data generated from our Discovery Farms project led into another very exciting project that Jared and a whole team of researchers is working on, and that started in 2016. And that's the idea where they're looking at more of conservation practices that we can do at the edge of the field to mitigate the risk of tile drainage here in this area. So we'll hear more about that next, but that was some controlled drainage projects and some saturated buffer projects. Just extra things you can do on the edge of the field to really reduce your risk of losses to the environment. Even though we have wrapped up the data collection at this farm, we do have a number of other locations currently throughout the state that we are collecting either surface runoff data or tile drainage data like we see here on the Nordick farm. And all of this data is, you can find, it's all real-time data, automatic monitoring. You can find all this data through our website. So if you're ever interested in learning more about water quality at the edge of field in Minnesota, you can look at our Discovery Farms Minnesota data set, and we have something for every type of farm and every type of landscape in Minnesota. All right, so thanks for watching the video. I'm going to try to share some slides now. There we are. Hopefully everybody can see that. So I just wanted to touch a little bit about what we have for Discovery Farms data throughout Minnesota and where we're at on Jared's farm. So Jared is located in Wilkin County, which is in northwest Minnesota. The unique thing about this area, as has been talked by Jared previously, is the water flows north to Canada and Lake Winnipeg from this Red River Basin area. So it's a little bit different in terms of watershed and different concerns than the rest of Minnesota, because the rest of Minnesota, all these sites drain to the Mississippi and eventually to the Gulf of Mexico. So sort of a unique part of Minnesota, and something that we really needed more edge of field water quality information on because it is so unique and has many different characteristics. So a little bit on soil water, because I'm a soil physics geek, sort of. You can picture soils as a mixture of pore space and solids, about 50% pore space and 50% solids within that soil matrix. And if we're looking at soil water, we talk, you might hear a few things called saturation, field capacity, and wilting point. And I think it's really important to differentiate those three different circumstances and when tiles are moving water during those three circumstances. The first one would be saturation, when those soils are completely full of water and will freely, gravity will freely pull water out of that soil profile. And that's when water is moving into the tile system and out of the field. As these soils drain and all that gravitational water is pulled out of the profile, they get to a point called field capacity. At this point, the tiles will not be pulling any more water out of that soil profile because it is held by negative pressure within that soil. And all of this water in these different pore spaces within the soil is considered plant available. So the water that is drained from saturation to field capacity is not considered plant available. Just this field capacity down to wilting point, when there's no water left in the soil profile, would be considered plant available water. Jared touched on a lot of this. I'll just go over it again. Benefits of drainage, if folks aren't familiar with drainage in this area. We have better plant establishment, growth, and yield because we can bring that water table down and have a more extensive root system, healthier plants, better nutrient use, timeliness of field operations and trafficability is improved, and also reduced surface runoff and soil erosion. And Jared touched on this a little bit before when thinking about a sponge and how if our soil profile is full, we're not going to be able to take on any more rainfall water. If it has room in that soil profile, it's going to infiltrate more water and not allow it to run off the surface at different times of the year. There are challenges with drainage and water quality as well. There can be some increased risk of nutrient movement to surface waters. And nitrogen is the primary concern when we're talking about tile drainage water, and I'll get into that in a little bit. I touched on a little bit about how much tile flow happens at the Nordick farms in that video. So this is a graph displaying the annual tile flow in inches for the Nordick farm here on the left and other Discovery Farm sites in Minnesota here on the right. And each one of these dots is a year's worth of data. So at the Nordick farm, we have 6 dots here. So 6 years of data. The median or almost average of the data is right around 3 inches. If we compare that to the rest of our data set in Minnesota, it is quite a bit less. And I touched on this in the video, but it's primarily because of the reduced precipitation in that region of Minnesota. The timeliness of when the tile flows is also different in that region of Minnesota compared to our rest of our Discovery Farms data set. So this graph is showing the monthly tile flow in inches of other Discovery Farm sites in the gray bars and the Nordick farms in the blue bars. So you can see where we have differences between the gray and the blue bars is when we're having a lot more flow in other parts of Minnesota and not as much flow at Jared's site. So during that early spring time period, because spring is much more delayed in that region, we just get much less water movement in that region until we get to June. And that's where we see primarily most of our flow at the Nordick site is that June time period. And then we'll also get some more as we come into September and October after that growing season ends. But again, the primarily that May, June time period is when we're going to be seeing most of our tile flow in that area. I talked a little bit before about precipitation and how it affects tile flow. This is a graph displaying annual precipitation versus tile flow, both in inches. And it's looking at all our tile sites. Each one of those is a dot. Each one of those site years is a dot throughout Minnesota. So there's a pretty good linear relationship. As precipitation increases, so does tile flow. The Nordick farm site years are identified in these clear square boxes, and they're all concentrated at this lower end of the annual precipitation graph. which means we're going to have less tile flow potential because of that fact. If we move into water quality, meaning what's in the water, we're looking at soil loss on a pounds per acre, phosphorus loss on a pounds per acre, and nitrogen loss on a pounds per acre. And these first graphs I'm putting up are other Discovery Farm sites, surface runoff on the left, and tile flow on the right. So if we're looking at soil loss, we can see there's a big difference between surface runoff and tile flow. So primarily most of our soil loss moves through surface runoff and not tile flow, and which makes sense, right? We need a lot of powerful water moving soil over the soil surface to move soil. And when we're measuring something that infiltrates the soil profile and then moves out of the system, we're going to have a lot less potential for soil movement in those cases. In the middle here, in the purple dots, we have phosphorus loss. And this is sort of the same picture, right? We can see a lot more potential for phosphorus loss through the surface runoff compared to tile drainage. And that is something we've observed throughout the state, but this is even more apparent at Jared's farm, and I'll show that in a little bit. Nitrogen, as we move into that, the story flips, where our primary nitrogen concern is movement through the soil profile and down to tiles. So primarily most of our nitrogen that we've monitored throughout the state has been through tile drainage. If we put up Jared's data, on the top here is soil loss, and you can see his numbers: 2 pounds, 11 pounds, 1, 24, and 3. Those are all in pounds per acre, and those are all for each individual year that we were there monitoring. So 2013 through 2018. So really low and consistently low numbers. Phosphorus losses were on the same range, just really low and consistently low, some below 0.01 pounds per acre. So we can't really measure or report any lower than that. So those soils in his area are really good at binding to phosphorus and not allowing it to leave that soil profile. As we move into nitrogen, we can see some differences from year to year here. And these are all primarily based on the amount of tile flow. As tile flow goes up from year to year or down, so does the corresponding nitrogen movement. But overall, Jared was sort of in the lower end of what we would expect for nitrogen movement through tile drainage from what we have seen throughout the rest of our monitoring in Minnesota. So when I talk about tile flow and the amount of tile flow and how it impacts the amount of nitrogen loss, the amount of nitrogen that can be moved, as you get more water that moves, tend to get more nitrogen that moves with it. This is a graph showing all our tile sites in Minnesota and graphing up tile flow versus nitrate loss. And Jared's numbers are indicated in the square boxes, but you can see there's a really good linear relationship between the two, and a positive linear relationship, meaning as tile flow increases, nitrate losses have increased at about the same rate. So on average, we see about 4 pounds of nitrate loss per inch of drainage, and we get a very good fit with that. But the problem here is we can have some differences. So say if we're at 5 inches here, we've had sites that have been less than 10 pounds and sites that have been over 40 pounds. So there is some scatter to the data. So what affects that scatter? Well, this is what we talk to our farmers about. What they have control over in their operations is the amount of nitrate concentration in that tile water. We might not be able to impact the amount of tile flow, but we have an impact on the amount of nitrate concentration in that soil profile, primarily due to what sort of 4R practices that our farmers are choosing. This is a graph displaying that same data of tile flow versus nitrate loss, but on these different site years now, we're just highlighting as the concentration of nitrate gets higher, the dots get bigger and the color gets darker. So you can see on this high end here, these are all high concentration nitrate in their tiles. And on the lower end here, we're at that 10 to 20 parts per million, which is a really good concentration, something to shoot for our corn soybean farmers in tiled systems. This is a chart talking about different nitrate concentrations in tile. It's from the Purdue University, put out by their extension service. And it's showing some different recommendations based on tile nitrate concentrations that we see in tile. Less than 5, you can see, is native grassland, CRP, alfalfa, managed pastures. So even in native grassland, other crops, there is no 0, right? There's always going to be something moving. 5 to 10 parts per million or milligrams per liter, we move into row production without fertilizer, row crop production without fertilizer, some row crop production with a cover crop to try to trap, and they're estimating we can reduce nitrate concentrations in that 5 to 10 parts per million. In the 10 to 20 parts per million, we're into that row crop production with and applied at optimate rates, you know, having good 4R practices. Those are ranges of nitrate in our tile that we can expect. And also soybeans, soybean crops. The problem is when we get above 20 parts per million, this is when we really need to look at and focus on our 4R practices in our fields, because our N-applied might be exceeding crop need, or the timing might be off, or we might be using a different product. These are all things that we have control over in our farming practices and should carefully look at if we're dealing with tile drainage situations. So if we apply this to Jared's numbers and look at nitrate sample concentrations in 2013, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18. So every year we were there. Rotation wise, we're in corn the first 2 years, then soybean, corn the next 2, and then soybean. So corn, soybean rotation. You can see all these dots are samples that were taken throughout that growing season. And primarily below that 20 milligrams per liter threshold of that document that recommends different nitrogen concentrations in tile line. So doing a really good job and staying really consistent throughout our monitoring there, always in general below that 20 milligrams per liter threshold. So this is where when we were talking about continuing monitoring and looking at different practices Jared could employ, there's not really a whole lot that he can do in field to reduce these concentrations any further. There are some things at the edge of the field that he can do to reduce losses of nitrogen. And that's going to be what this next presentation and talk is going to be about, is different conservation practices implemented at the edge of the field to reduce his impact even further. So with that, I will stop my slideshow. I'm not seeing any questions.
No, I don't see any at this point either. And if people want to look in the Q&A screen, they'll see that there have been a couple of questions that have been answered by the panelists directly in those boxes as well. So I'd point you in that direction. So if you have questions, again, continue to put them in the question box. But for now, we're going to transition and there have been both Jared and Tim have alluded to some of the ongoing research that's going on at Nordick Farm with controlled drainage and saturated buffers. And so we're very fortunate to have Jabba Kiersgaard with the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. He's a research scientist there and has been a very, very good supporter of our programs and helps us plan these and other activities like our nutrient management conferences. And so I want to thank him for that. And again, I think we have a short video. Jabba was part of the filming up at Nordick Farms back in the fall. And so we'll turn it over to Jabba for the video and then his presentation.
Yes, thank you, Warren. Thank you. I appreciate that introduction. So I think, Tim, we'll probably just start with the video.
So my name's Jabba Kjarsgaard, and I work with the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. And I'm one of the people working at this Red River Valley Drainage Water Management project that we have established here at the Nordick farm. We're located in the southern part of the Red River Basin, and this is an area where we continue to see a lot of interest in installing subsurface drainage, or tile drainage as it's also sometimes called. The agronomic benefits of subsurface drainage has been shown over and over again, but there are some negative environmental impacts from subsurface drainage as well. But there are different drainage practices that can be implemented along with the subsurface drainage systems that will minimize or even remove some of those negative environmental impacts. And so what we're looking at this project is to both to implement and demonstrate some of those practices, both in terms of removing nitrogen from the tile water, so that's a water quality issue, as well as hold water back within the field during times of the year where we don't need to drain, so we are delaying the movement of water off the field, or even removing some of that water through extra crop water uptake. So there are two practices that we're going to talk about today. One is called controlled drainage. And the way that works is that we can raise or lower the outlet elevation of that tile system. And so we can raise it during times of the year where we don't need to drain, and thereby hold water back within the soil. Whereas other parts of the year where we need to drain some of the water, where we can lower that outlet elevation. And the way that is done is by installing drainage control structure near the outlet of that of the subsurface drainage system, and we have one right here. And the way this works is that it is a structure. This one is round, sometimes they're square, that is installed on the tile line itself. Then inside this control structure, we have some gliders where we can insert boards near the bottom, and these boards can slide up and down within these gliders, and I'm just going to demonstrate by pulling out one of these boards now. So by adding or removing these boards, we can change that outlet elevation. Now currently we are at the end of August. The crop is consuming water at a high rate right now, between a quarter and a third of an inch per day. So right now we don't have any tile flow. But normally if we had flow, by inserting more boards, we would hold more water back within the field, and thereby again delaying the movement of water off that field. To make sure that the results from this project is meaningful, we wanted to do the study at a scale that is relevant for farmers or for other practitioners to look at. So therefore, this is not a university plot scale. This is a full quarter section that we are monitoring. And so the way this is set up is that we are working on this quarter section of ground, and we divided it into 3 areas. The northernmost section does not have any subsurface drainage in it, so if there is excess water, it runs off through surface runoff. The middle third has what we call free drainage, which means that we do not have any controls at the outlet. Whereas the southern third, we divided into 4 zones, and each zone has a control structure at the outlet where we can control that outlet elevation and hold water back within each of those 4 zones during the growing season when we don't need to drain. At the outlet of both the area with free drainage and the one with controlled drainage, we are monitoring the flow of water. So we're monitoring how much and when the water is flowing, and we're collecting water samples, which we then analyze for nitrogen and phosphorus and sediment. We've been monitoring this site for 3 years, from 2017 through 2019, and the monitoring is ongoing. And the results has been very encouraging. What we've seen so far is that we are able to reduce the amount of water that is leaving the field by between 20 and 30%. It varies a little bit from one year to another. What we're also seeing is that by holding water back in the field, that we are delaying when the water is moving off the field, so we can hold the water back until the risk of downstream flooding has subsided. But also by holding water back in the field longer, we are seeing a removal of the nitrogen that is in that water in the form of nitrate. And that is either through, primarily through plant uptake, and there might be some that's removed through denitrification also. So we are seeing a reduction in the amount of nitrate that's leaving the field of a little over 30%.
So we're at our second site here on section 24 is what we're calling it. A saturated buffer is kind of what we're looking at right now. There's 10 acres that drain into here. So what happens is it drains in, and then there's 4-inch perforated pipe that go back out here into a saturated buffer. So it's kind of like a drain field for like a sewer system, as some people kind of, think of it as. So the 2 pipes get drained in out here, and then we have these observation wells that we can take water samples from to see what we are removing from, point A to point B. And by having them staged and then knowing what the creek water is, we can actually identify, is the saturated buffer doing what it's supposed to be doing. So like I say, and there is a quick release that if we do have a high flow of water and the saturated buffer is full, it will just bypass and get directly deposited right into the waterway like a normal tile situation would have been. In the back is the same thing. You can see back there, we have some non-perforated tile going around this edge because we didn't want to make that saturated to make it wet. So we have some non-perf there, and then once we got up top, then we ran that water downhill also towards them same things. So these outlets, this is not outletted in the creek, it's just what's in the soil. It stays saturated and grass grows over the top.
This project is truly a partnership project where we have a number of partners that came together and were talking about saying we need to study these practices, we need some data to figure out if these practices will work up here in the Red River Basin. And so on this sign we have listed all the project partners, and that includes both some of the local Soil and Water Conservation District here in Wilkin County, as well as the Soil and Water District, as well as both state, federal agencies and industry groups as well, that all came together and to partner on this project.
Okay, just had to find the unmute button there. So can you all hear me okay?
Yep, you're good, Jaba.
Excellent, great, thanks, Warren. So yeah, again, my name is Jaba Kjaersgaard, and I'm a research scientist with the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. And so the video we just saw gives a little bit of an overview of the practices that we're looking at and are demonstrating up at Jared's farm. I'm just the next few minutes gonna go into a few more details about some of the findings that we have found at the site during the monitoring here for the last 2 years and 3 years at the site. And so before getting into that, I certainly wanna recognize all the project partners. Now, these were mentioned in the video as well, but I think it's just really, really important to stress that this is a truly a partnership program or a partnership project where even organizations that maybe is looking at drainage from a little bit different perspectives all came together and said, hey, this is something that is really important, something we should look at. And so everyone who are listed on this slide are partners on the project, and everyone here has provided some level of contribution, whether it was funding or materials for the project. Also on this slide, we do have the objectives listed for this project. So again, that is to demonstrate some of those conservation drainage practices that may have water quality and water quantity benefits in the Red River Basin, and then those water quantity benefits might include water storage. Both Tim and Jared did a great job discussing some of the background for this project and some of the water quality challenges that we're trying to address with these practices. So I'm not going to go into those now. But again, both as Jared and Tim mentioned, we are in Wilkin County, in sort of the west central part of Minnesota, in the very towards the southern end of the Red River Basin. We have 2 project sites at the farm. One is at section 16, where we are looking at controlled drainage, and we have what we call section 24, where we have both controlled drainage and a saturated buffer. And so again, we're going to look at some of the information of the data that we're collecting at that site. First, I just wanted to recap at what we call section 16, where we have controlled drainage. We're going to look at some of the little bit of the data next. And again, this was that full quarter section that is divided into 3 areas. The northern third does not have any subsurface drainage. We're not going to talk about that any further today, but we are going to compare the middle and the southern areas of this field, where we have free drainage, no control at the outlet at the middle piece, and then we have controlled drainage in the southern piece. The southern piece with controlled drainage, we have divided into 4 separate zones, each with a control structure at the outlet. And again, as we talked about in the video, we can raise or lower the outlet elevation at each of those 4 control structures, so we can manage when we are holding water back within the field. The way we manage it is that we lower we open the control structures and lower the water in the spring when we need, while we're coming in doing our field work and spraying and such. And then once we're done with that, we raise the outlet elevation, and then to hold any additional moisture that might reside in the field at that time back. And then we slowly lower that outlet elevation as the growing season progresses, so just to stay just below the root zone or the roots, so that we are not pruning any of the roots, because they don't like to grow into a saturated soil. At this site, we have been collecting data now for 3 years, from 2017 to 2019. And in this figure, showing a summary of the data across all 3 years. So along the bottom, we see the different quantities we're measuring, and then it's all measured at the same scale over on the left, on the y-axis there. So all the green bars, that is what we're measuring from those 4 combined from the 4 control drainage zones, and the blue bars, that is the free drainage. So that's that middle part of the field. Starting with rainfall, though, on average we've seen just shy of 24 inches a year. For the subsurface drainage amount, again here, our main goal here is to drain less water, and we are seeing about just shy of a 20% reduction in water moving off the field with controlled drainage, about 4.5 inches on average in these years, compared to 5.5 inches with free drainage. But it varies quite a bit from one year to another, and the timing of when we have that flow. For nitrate nitrogen reduction, and again this is in pounds per acre, we are seeing about a 30% reduction in the amount of nitrate, that is nitrate nitrogen, that we are losing from this field, at about 11 pounds with controlled drainage, and close to 16 with free drainage. The next, total killed nitrogen, that is other forms of nitrogen, not nitrate and nitrite, relatively low numbers, as it would be expected through a tile system, and then the total nitrogen of those added together. Then we have on the phosphorus side, so we have our dissolved phosphorus, so that's the phosphorus that is dissolved in the water, and then we have total phosphorus, so that's the total amount of phosphorus we have coming off the field, and we see, as expected, some low values for the dissolved phosphorus. We don't really see a difference between the controlled drainage and free drainage, but again, the numbers are very small, so I think we're just not picking up any differences at the differences stemming from differences in the depth of surface drainage that's coming off the field. For total phosphorus, so far we have seen a little more coming off in the controlled drainage, which was a little surprising to us. We do think it is because, especially the first year, we did have more what we call total suspended solids, or in essence soil coming out through the water. We think it's an artifact from the installation, and that because we had more solids in the tile, we had more phosphorus coming out, but it's certainly something we're keeping an eye on. The other practice we were looking at is the saturated buffer. And again, this after we're doing the video, but I thought we would just look at it one more time. And so in this graphic we have here, that shows what we call a traditional system, where over on the right side of the figure we have a field, and then we have a tile main line going through a buffer that runs along a stream or a drainage ditch. And so where the water is just being routed directly through the tile line into the stream. With a saturated buffer, the idea is to insert a diverter box or a control structure somewhere on that tile main line as it exits the field. And then that diverter box is connected to a distribution pipe, or distribution pipes if they go in both directions from the diverter box. And then the diverter box then routes the water from the main line into those distribution pipes, which are buried at the same depth as what the tile is. So typically they're at about 3 feet, 3 to 4 feet. Then that water moves out of that distribution line into the soil, and then it makes its way down gradient towards the stream through the soil in the buffer. And then it not only slows down the movement of water towards the stream, so we don't have as much of a peak flow coming off, but we also, as the water is moving through that buffer, we remove the nitrogen that's in the water, either through denitrification and to a smaller extent through plant uptake as well. We are removing some of the water as well, but we are seeing just a more vigorous crop growth on the buffer, so our crop uptake is a little higher as well. In this particular case, the buffer we built, we saw it in the video, the buffer width from that distribution line to the stream is about 50 feet, and the bank height is about 5 feet. There are some design considerations that will need to be considered before putting in a saturated buffer to make sure that both that we don't destabilize the banks of the buffer, but also that we are not holding water back up into the field. But this site is very conducive to a saturated buffer with the dimensions of both the width of the buffer and the bank height. The field we're working on is this one is what we call section 24. This field we have divided into 3 zones. We call them 1, 2, and 3. The thicker black lines and the purple lines, and this one are the main lines, and then the somewhat thinner black lines there are the laterals. Zone 1 and 2, we are managing with control drainage, so we're collecting data there as well. We're not going to review those today. But zone 3, because it is a little irregular in shape, that part of the field did not lend itself very well to control drainage, so we put a saturated buffer at the outlet of that one as well. We'll also notice that this field, other than being irregular in shape, we do have that drainage way, or that stream meandering, coming down from the north, from the top of the image, and then it meanders along the edges of the field, both on the east side and then along the south side of the field there. What we are focusing on is this area down in the red box. That is where we have that saturated buffer installed. So it's those, I guess, turquoise lines. That's the distribution line that is kind of pulled into a couple of the oxbows along that stream. And just jumping right into the data that we are seeing from this saturated buffer. And this is from 2 years only, 2018 and 2019. So it's a little bit of a different time period compared to the control drainage data we looked at before. We're looking at it at a concentration base. We are averaging about just over 20 milligrams per liter of nitrogen coming off the field. And within this saturated buffer, again, this distribution line, that's the purple and the red lines here, we have installed a total of 16 observation wells or monitoring wells. Within, and they are positioned in pairs, so that we have 8 of the wells that are installed 1/3 of the way between the distribution line and the stream, and the other 8 are 2/3 of the way between the distribution line and the stream. And we are then collecting water samples out of those wells, and by doing that, we can monitor the nitrate concentration of the water as it moves down, as it moves through that buffer, and thereby we can see how much of that we're removing. And so again, we're having on average just over 20 milligrams per liter nitrate coming in. The numbers in the purple boxes, that correspond to the concentration in the wells when the water has moved 1/3 of the way through the buffer. And the numbers in the turquoise boxes, that is when the water has moved 2/3 of the way. And we can certainly see that in most cases, even as the water has moved just 1/3 of the way, that we have a very substantial removal or reduction in nitrate concentration. And when we are 2/3 of the way, in some cases, we have almost complete removal. And in other cases, we certainly have a very, very substantial removal of that nitrate. So we are very encouraged by these results, that we think that our buffer here works very, very well. Just looking at the numbers in a little bit of a different way. Again, I've summarized the numbers into this table, and there's a lot of information in here. The way, again, it's for 2018 and to 2019, so 2-year average, flow-weighted average from 2 years. And then in this table along the top there, we have numbers from the field, the amount that's going into the saturated buffer, and the amount that's going through the bypass, and then a percentage of the water from the field that is going into the saturated buffer. I failed to mention that as part of the setup in the saturated buffer is that we do have a bypass in that control structure, so that if there's more water coming from the field than we can push out through the saturated buffer, then that excess water just runs over the bypass and then directly into the stream. We're not holding water back in the field during times of the year where we have high levels of flow. But of course, the water through the bypass is not being treated by the saturated buffer. So we need to consider that when we are talking about the efficiency of the saturated buffer. On average, at this field, again, for 2 years, we have 22 inches of precip. The average drainage from the field for these 2 years was 2.4 inches, a little bit less than we saw at the other field, a little bit different behavior at this site. Of those 2.4 inches, we are routing 2.2 inches into that saturated buffer, and 0.2 inches went through the bypass. So that means we actually routed over 90% of the water that came from the field into that saturated buffer. Then if we look at the amount of nitrate that came from the field, as a total is a 12-acre field, we had 98 pounds, of nitrate that came off that field average for those 2 years. Of that, again, we routed 87 pounds through the saturated buffer, and 11 pounds just went straight into the stream. So we're routing about 89% of that nitrate through the buffer. So then if we look at, well, what happened to those 87 pounds that went through the buffer? Well, what we found was, well, again, we know we had the 87 pounds going into the buffer. Then if we look at the concentrations in the upstream wells, well, then we saw that by the time the water had moved 1/3 of the way, over half of it had been removed. So about 44 pounds of the nitrate was gone. And then by the time the water had moved to the downstream wells, so 2/3 of the way, we had 74 pounds removed. Now, there's no doubt there's further removal taking place between the second set of wells and the stream itself. We still have 1/3 of the way to go, but we don't have a way to quantify that. So what we can say is, we had at least 74 pounds removed. And if we look at that as a total, again, 74 pounds removed, and we are dividing that by the 98 pounds that came from the field, that gives us about a 76% removal rate by the buffer, which we think is very, very good, very, very encouraging. And again, the 74 pounds removal rates we know is lower than what we're actually having. So that 76% number is in reality higher than that. But that's what we can measure. So that's what we go by. I just wanted to, so that was the data. I just wanted to mention a 10-state project that's looking at different conservation drainage practices. It's called the transformingdrainage.org, where researchers and practitioners have come together looking at different practices to looking at different conservation drainage practices and their benefits, both in terms of agronomics, but also on water quality. So if anyone is interested, I encourage you to take a look at that. And they're looking at both saturated buffers, controlled drainage, and other practices as well. And so with that, that's what I had. And I think I will take any questions if there are any either questions about this. And I'm sure we could also open the floor to questions.
Perfect. Thank you, Yaba. And before you turn your slides off, I have the first question for you. Darn. I didn't catch you in time. My question was this. In the saturated buffer, when you were talking about the pounds removed, maybe I was multitasking and trying to do something else at the same time, so I missed it. But those numbers looked bigger to me on a per acre basis. So I'm wondering, was that a 2-year total, or if you go back 3 or 4 slides there to those numbers? The 98 pounds total per year from the field. Tell me a little bit more about that, because those numbers sound bigger than I'm used to.
Yeah. Thanks for pointing that out, Warren. Yeah. So these numbers, that is it is the average by year, but the total coming off for the entire field. So it's not on a per acre basis. This is okay. for the entire area that is draining into that saturated buffer.
Perfect. Thank you. That helps with the context.
Absolutely, and that's very important. That's an important distinction, because we are certainly not seeing these numbers on a per acre basis. You're absolutely right. That certainly would be of concern. But no, this is for the whole field that's draining into that.
Very good. Thank you for that. Any other questions that folks have, please type them in to the Q&A. I'm also monitoring the chat box as well. And so while we're waiting just for a moment to let people type questions, I'll ask another question. This research looks like you've got a couple of crop years with the saturated buffer. Can you tell us about plans for the future? Are you going to collect more years of data, and do you have kind of a minimum set of years you'd like to be at this location?
Yeah, that's another great question, Warren. Thanks for asking that also. Yeah, the idea at this site is to collect information for at least 7 years. And so we're about halfway through at this point in time. And so, but we do want to capture as many different situations, both in terms of weather conditions, both drier years and wetter years and normal years, as well as going through multiple crop rotations, because we know that we're seeing that already, of course, just the year-to-year variation. And so to be able to talk about these practices with confidence, we do need to have those additional years to have sort of more of a long-term average. So yeah, a 7-year period is what we're planning on at this point in time. I'm hopeful we could continue beyond that, but that's the plan we have.
Okay, perfect. Another question has come in the Q&A box, and I guess I'd ask you first, Yaba, and then also if Jared has a perspective on this, I'd ask him to chime in. What is the maintenance requirement for a saturated buffer, and does the vegetation on it need to be harvested periodically to prevent nutrients from building up?
Yeah, that's another great question. Starting with the last bit about the vegetation. That what we're seeing at this site, and what has been observed at other saturated buffer sites in Minnesota and elsewhere as well, is that it's not uncommon to have a more vigorous vegetation growth over the buffer. In our case, the buffer is covered with grass. Other buffers might have other either trees or other types of vegetation. But again, we can certainly see it in especially around that sort of late summer, August timeframe, where it otherwise might start to dry up a little bit. That if we have flow or even just carry over moisture in the within the buffer is higher than elsewhere. So we do have more vigorous growth. When we talk about nitrogen, most of the nitrogen removal is through denitrification. And so some of it that is taken up by the plant, and most certainly if we're able to harvest the grass off and hay it, or if we could harvest it off as a green manure almost, and then haul it back to the field, that they would have a little bit of an impact on the nitrogen side. Whereas when we talk about, but again, most of the nitrogen is removed by denitrification. Whereas if we talk about phosphorus, that's a different story, because with phosphorus, that does not convert to a gaseous form. And so over time, if that's, even though it's very little, but the small amount of phosphorus that is in that drainage water, it will accumulate within the buffer. And so the way to remove that is really through plant uptake, and then remove that biomass, and again, use it as green manure, as a hay, or some other ways of doing it. So if we want to see a benefit for phosphorus removal, yes, then we certainly would need to remove that biomass and the phosphorus that comes off with it. So when we talk about this, we need to distinguish between nitrogen and phosphorus. In terms of maintenance, there really is not a lot of maintenance involved in the saturated buffer. We have the board set in that control structure, and we're really not adjusting those. The maintenance that might come with it, again, that could maybe a little more frequent mowing. Also, there has been some reports in some places about root intrusion into that distribution line, since we have perennial vegetation on top of it. But it seems if there are certain plant species that may be able to do that. We have not seen that. That has not been a problem for us at this point in time. And with the species we have there, I don't think it will be. But that could be a potential concern. But again, there really is very little maintenance. Also, I do want to say that the installation cost is really quite low if you compare a saturated buffer to other practices. That for a saturated buffer, of course, you need a suitable site. But other than that, there's the control structure, which runs about $1,000 to maybe $1,300. And then there's the distribution line that has to be pulled in. In our case, it was pulled in when the field was tiled, so we didn't have to pay relocation costs for the tile plow or anything. And so all in all, it came in at about $1 a foot. And so we are I think about $2,500 to $3,000 for that whole system. And then there might be cost share available either from local soil and water districts, which there was in our case, or the NRCS. So from a cost perspective, it really is quite inexpensive. Maybe Jared, any other comments?
No, not really. I guess, yeah, I mean, that would be the only thing moving forward, Yaben, which we haven't really hit that, stage yet, would be, a cost of, harvesting some grass off of there, or trying to manage that leftover nitrogen as it ends up in a plant or whatever. But yeah, otherwise there's really no yearly cost to it at all, no maintenance at all. Yep.
Yeah, I was glad to hear you reference the root intrusion into the tile question, because I know that's one question farmers often ask. If you've got these very vigorous perennial plants growing, is it possible that those lines could get plugged up at some point? And it sounds like so far your experience, at least in Minnesota, with the types of plants we're using, that's not been an issue.
Well, we have not seen it. I know there is another site located more in in the Redwood Falls area, where that particular site has been in operation somewhat longer, and they did run a camera down through that the tile in that saturated buffer, and they did see they could see some roots that had made their way into the tile. Now, at that particular site, there is a lot of, it's very heavily or somewhat heavily wooded. So there are those species, and I'm not sure if they went as far as, I think they took some root samples to try and figure out, well, what plants they actually came from. But it is so it could be an issue. But again, it does depend on the species that are growing. And I know that there are, even from the state side, the Board of Water and Soil Resources, they have some recommendations for suitable plant species that are not as deeply rooted, so that if root intrusion is a very serious concern, then there is a listing of vegetation that might be suitable for to plant over a saturated buffer. But again, there are other opportunities as well when it comes to a saturated buffer. It lends itself well to, say, whether it's for haying or Jared talked about a pollinator habitat earlier, which could work as well. So there are some additional opportunities when it comes to utilizing the vegetation there.
Very good, thank you. And I point people towards the Q&A box. Kevin Keener has indicated and noted that Iowa State is also doing some research on root penetration into tiles and looking with cameras to see what's happening there. And he actually provides a website where you can see information on that. So thank you, Kevin, for that. I'm not seeing any other questions at this point. If you've got any, feel free to type them in, but I think I just have a couple comments I want to make as we wrap up here. First, I want to again thank all of our sponsors for today. I especially want to thank Adam Hergis with Mosaic. Adam is really active in helping us put this program together, making sure that we find other sponsors, get it funded, and all that sort of thing. So special thanks to you, Adam. And then also Caitlin Keck with ETS, Environmental Tillage Systems, has provided a lot of input into the program and also helped us put together the flyer and such. So special thanks to those folks. But I want to thank all of our sponsors for your help in putting this program together and financially supporting it. I also want to mention that for those who have attended in the past, we've had basically a 9 to 3 or 3:30 event, so pretty much full day. When we made the decision to go virtual, we decided that we were going to break it into 2. And so you've only been hearing about this piece today up to this point because we didn't want to create confusion by promoting both at the same time. But our focus today was really on Brian Ryberg and Jared Nordick and the research that's going on at their farms and the farmer side of 4Rs and where we see innovation and new implementation. Our next piece in the virtual 4R Technology Field Day, and you'll begin to see flyers about this starting tomorrow, will be on December 1st. It'll be a similar format with Zoom, and it will focus on a new program that you may have heard about already through the rollout, but we wanted to do a virtual Zoom meeting to aid that rollout, and it will focus on a new program starting in Minnesota this year. It's the 4R Nutrient Stewardship Certification Program, and it's being administered by the Minnesota Crop Production Retailers, and it really is a retailer-focused program to ensure that the farmers, in partnership with the retailers they work with, are doing the 4R practices and looking at rates and how they manage crop nutrients, really much like we've heard about today, but really focusing on the retailer's role and how they work with farmers to achieve 4R benefits. So watch for information on that Zoom meeting starting tomorrow, and you can register, and the format basically will be the same way, about a 2.5-hour Zoom meeting. You'll hear from folks who helped develop the program and some retailers who have been involved in piloting and learning more about the program. I also want to thank our panelists for today. You've all done a great job, and we appreciate you making yourselves available and willing to share your stories. So thank you to every one of you as a presenter. And now I see another question. let me read this. Question is, and I guess I'd open this up to our panelists, especially perhaps our two farmers. Any advice from the growers to the agronomists or retailers? How do we get more information and sensitivity? And I take that to mean really that people are paying attention to and utilizing and incorporating this sort of information into how they are managing nutrients. So our farmers, any thoughts on how we can make this information more useful to folks?
This is Brian. I guess I'd offer, platforms like this. Unfortunately, we're limited to, meetings in person, but I think there is a sensitivity to pushing a new trend to farmers because many are not adaptive to change, but yet, I think with environmental regulations continuing as they are, we're going to be forced to go to some of these. So whether it's a co-op holding meetings or NRCS or some level like that, I think we just need to get this type of information out.
Very good. Thanks, Brian. Jared, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'd really agree with Brian. I mean, Discovery Farms, it's kind of a dot on the map. And, you guys, Warren, how do we share our story across the countryside and get it out? And I guess, me at the local level, I've, kind of opened my farm and with the River Valley drainage water, site that we have here is try to invite anybody and have a farm day type deal, which, yeah, doing this whole COVID deal is not working very good, but what's it really cost to, run a Zoom meeting? And I guess if that's what we got to keep doing, I guess, I think all of us that are in this and are trying to be proactive through all this are willing to commit that time and keep moving forward. So, anybody that wants to contact me, I guess I'm open, for any conversation, reply back or ask for my information. I'll surely send it out and let's keep moving forward.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. And a reminder to me, and I'd ask Tim, if you have it, could you put up the QR code for those who are CCAs? We've gotten several emails or chat notations from folks so that they can have us send their CCA number in to make sure they get CEUs, but you should be seeing on your screen now the QR code. So we'll leave that up there for a bit. And if for those who have been waiting for that and would like to sign in through that, you can do that. While I do that, I'll also ask Tim, I want to remind everybody we've been recording this and it will be available. And Tim, could you remind me and the rest of us how it will be available?
You bet. Yeah, I'll just add, I tried out the QR code this morning. It does work. So if you pull up your CCA app and add and shoot the code off the screen, it should work. If it doesn't, just let me or Warren know. I know we've gotten a bunch of messages already. But this has been recorded. It has been on Facebook Live this morning. So it will stay there. The recording of this session will also be posted to our YouTube channel. So MAWRC does have a YouTube channel that this whole session will be posted to.
All right. Thank you, Tim. And let's see. I had a couple of notes from folks who aren't seeing the code. I just sent a note out to see if you're seeing it now. Hopefully it did show up for you. If not, again, just simply either in the chat box or in the Q&A box, if you note your name and your CCA number, we'll be sure that you get credits. So with that, again, last thanks to our sponsors. Thank you to all of our panelists, and reminder that you'll start seeing notes tomorrow about the December 1st event, which will be highlighting the brand new retailer focused 4R nutrient stewardship program. And also, if you want to go back and review any of this information, you can go back and find it either at our YouTube channel or on Facebook. So with that, huge thanks to everyone for participating this morning. I've been kind of keeping track of participation, and we've been as high as 60, but we've stayed for the most part in the high 50s. So, and that doesn't include panelists. So we appreciate all of your support for our first attempt at this, and we'll see how long this pandemic keeps us doing things virtually, but look forward to joining us on December 1st. Thank you.
Thank you.